Alright, hello and welcome to a glorious Barston Lakes. The sun's out, it's 25 degrees, got my sun cream on. On the way up, my thermometer on the car said 6 degrees, and to be fair, it's not much warmer now, and it's raining. But on the plus side, we're going to have a go at one of my favourite methods. It's a pellet waggler. Seems totally wrong to do it on a day like today when it's freezing cold, but it is early on in the year, and as I can see from loose feeding these pellets, there are a few fish coming up and feeding even though it is so cold. So today we're going to have hopefully a nice session on the pellet waggler. I'm going to show you a few things, especially on a day like today when it's a bit cold, probably not ideal, but there are a few things sort of early on in the year you can do to turn the odds in your favour. So we're going to have a good session today. I'm going to run you through some kit first of all, and then hopefully we'll catch some fish. Right, so first of all, I'll run you through the bait I've got today. Really simple. All I've got on my side tray is a tub of 8mm Thin Perfect feed pellets. Importantly with these, they're the sort of bigger style pellets. They make loads of noise when they hit the water, and that's really important on a big venue like this, is to make lots of noise. You don't necessarily need to feed loads and loads of bait, but sort of 2 or 3 big pellets hitting the water can be really effective. This venue in particular sees a lot of boilies, carp hangers hitting the water, so they're used to big baits. Whilst the Norwegian aeroplane goes over, I'll carry on. Hook bait choice, the only other thing on my side tray is I've got a few fluoro wafters. Water's really coloured today, and sometimes putting on a pink or orange wafter can sort of get you those extra bites, so it's worth having on your side trays. It's a bit of a change bait. I'll keep these pellets going in, so I'm sort of feeding 4 or 5 pellets at a time. Just keep them going in, get the fish competing. So I don't need to feed loads and loads of bait, it's just about making a noise and getting the fish competing, sort of looking around for that sort of 1 or 2 pellets. There's a few swirls on the top. And the other thing, bait wise, is a bit of absolute pellet oil. Just sometimes a tiny bit of that on your pellets. You don't need to have loads. You can sort of draw fish in, help draw fish in from quite a big area really sometimes, and just you'd be amazed how adding some of that to your pellets can make all the difference sometimes. Right, so on to the tackle, starting with a big rod. Like I said, I've got a 11 and a 12 foot rod set up today, both Superior X's. 12 foot rod in particular, it's quite good on venues, big ones like this, big open venues where you sometimes need to cast a long way, sometimes you can see a few fish showing, and that's where the 12 foot rod comes in. I've got a £5 Preston Float Max. You'd be amazed how durable this line is. I've used it for quite a few years, and before it came out I was amazed at how sort of durable it was. And then we've got something a bit new today. We've got the new Preston Precision pellet wagglers in the bigger sizes. So we've got a 8, a 10 and a 12 gram. At the minute I've got a 10 gram on there. I've set it up really simple with the Stops pellet waggler kits. This is there. Basically all you need to do is slide that onto your main line. Then all I've done is tied a loop and then I've attached my hook length loop to loop, and it's really simple, doesn't really tangle. And as you see here, I've left a bit of a gap there between the stops. That's quite important when you're using a loaded float, because when you do get a bite, you strike and it folds. You're not striking against the float, you're striking against the fish. So just a little gap, sort of a few inches, can be quite good when you're sort of hitting bites, help you hit more bites, sorry. So that's it. I've got, like I said, the new Precision pellet wagglers on that, bigger sizes. I mean, a lot of my fishing is sort of all about using the smallest floats I can get away with, but there are exceptions, and venues like this are one of them. You'd be amazed how putting on a great big float like that, maybe 10 or 12 gram, making a really big splash can get you those extra bites, especially when you're casting out at range. Maybe you see a few fish. Like I said before, this venue sees a lot of big baits like boilies hitting the water. They're not afraid of a big splash, and they will come to a big splash of a float like that. So moving on to my other rod, it's sort of more towards what I'm sort of known for, really, pellet wagglers and using the lightest floats I can get away with. I've got 11-foot rod, and I've got the older style Precision pellet wagglers, and like I said before, the beauty with these wagglers is they've got these loading on the bottom, but you've also got the option of fishing an unloaded pellet waggler, which is what I've done there. All I've done is I've got a float adapter and 2 non-toxic shot either side of the float, just a traditional float setup with an unloaded waggler. And like I said before, by using the lightest float you can get away with and the smallest splash, sometimes that can get you some, you know, the sort of wiser fish that are used to getting caught on big floats. So they're my 2 setups. I've got this one for chucking in my feed, and also the heavier float, the new style thicker float for casting towards fish out in the middle of the lake, or when the wind does get up, I can use that in amongst my feed as well. So that covers lots of options depending on what's happening. So because I'm not fed for a while, I'm gonna keep the bait going in, get a few fish feeding, and hopefully we'll try and catch one. So I didn't mention my hook lengths I've got. I've got 0.15 power line to a 14 KKH, and all I've got is a band on the hair ready to band an 8mm pellet. So I'm starting on my big rod at the minute with the new style bigger Precision pellet wagglers. I think that was thunder then. Might be an aeroplane, I don't know. So before I cast out, I'm just going to keep bait going in, 4 or 5 pellets, going to feed a couple times. So there's no set rules to what you feed really, it's all about swapping and changing a lot. And I'm going to cast the bigger rod over the top. It's gone just beyond the feed, but that's not a problem. And then what I can do then, keep my eye on the float. A few fish out there. And I can feed to sort of comfortable distance that I've been feeding, but I can reel back the float in amongst the feed and let that hook bait drop down. Sometimes that can be a really effective way of catching. And keep the bait going in and do the same again, reel it back, just lifts that pellet up and drops it back down again. Like with sort of all shallow fishing really, you don't really get bites when you're just hanging it there. You get bites as it's sort of falling through. So with that said, oh, there's a fish on. Might be foul at that one. Oh, might not be. But as I was about to do, I was going to reel back in and be really active, because that's really important when you pellet waggler fishing. Oh, it's come off, it was foul, I think. So I've set my rig about a couple foot deep at the minute. Obviously those fish will feed right up in the water, you can see a couple on the top there. And you will get bites literally as soon as it hits the water. But because I'm fishing a couple foot away from the float, it means that the splash of the float doesn't spook the fish. And what I'm trying to do is cast out and feather the float when it hits the water, That way I'm going to try and get my pellet to hit the water before the float. That way everything's out straight, and importantly they come to the pellet rather than the float. I'll keep the bait going in while I'm talking. So I've got a few pellets hitting the water there. I'm going to cast out, but importantly I'm going to stop it before it hits the water, let it all go out straight. And now is sort of when I'm expecting a fish. Because I've not had one sort of within sort of 10 seconds or so, I keep feeding, and then I'll bring back the float in amongst the feed. Just keep active. Like I said, there's no point leaving it out there if you've not had a bite. Back in amongst the feed. A few swirls out there. It's also important, make sure you've got your clutch set on your reel. Oh, there's one. Oh, it's come off. Because you can cameraman's laughing, because you can get bites quite quickly. You need to be ready for it. So literally as soon as the float hits the water, you need to be ready for a big fish, because sometimes they can bolt off. There's one or two there at the minute. I think because the wind's dropped, I'm actually going to swap rods, which is something I do quite a lot. Just swap and change to the conditions. Like I said, I've swapped to the smaller float now. Got it set the same depth. Check the clutch. Like I was doing before, I'm going to feed before I cast. I'm going to feed a couple of times. And the idea is to drop my float in amongst it, like so. And now is when I'm expecting a bite. Nearly had it. The trouble today is the water's quite coloured, so I think you need that splash when it hits the water for the fish to find the feed. For this time I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm not going to feed, I'm just going to cast out in amongst the fish, because there's one or two there. Stopped it before it hit the water, let it all fall out straight. Oh, another little liner there. I think he was trying to get it, but I got a bit giddy, I think. But it's not a problem, the fish is still out there. It's all about keeping active. My hands are absolutely freezing, and it seems so wrong to be catching on this, but it is spring and the water is warming up, and these fish do want to feed. But at the minute they are competing for feed out there, so I've got a twig or something there. It just shows how surprising fishing can be, really, because we've turned up today thinking, oh, it'll be sort of a feeder or a bomb session sort of in winter, but these fish are readily coming up in the water. I'm being active. I didn't have a bite there straight away, so I'm reeling in, keep the bait going in, cast over the top. It's not really a lazy man's method, just got to keep going at it. There we go, that looks like a big fish. So it's like fishing a pole, really. You wouldn't just sort of leave your rig out there and spray bait at it. You need to keep working your rig. And in this case it involves casting the float and reeling back in and out all the time. What you can do whilst you're playing a fish, sometimes pick up the catapult, keep the bait going in while you're playing the fish. See, if it was a match and it was really important to land the fish, then I'd concentrate on playing the fish, but at the minute I'm trying to draw fish in the peg and keep the fish competing. I'm keeping the rod low, just sort of pumping the fish back. Keep the bait going in as well. So keeping the rod low until the fish comes close. I'm going to lift the rod. It's an F1 this time. Oh, it's gone in a snag. There it goes. There we go. Now the F1's in Boston. Quite old fish now, but they're really chunky big fish. Hooks come out in the net. And well worth catching, and they do like to feed up in the water. There goes, probably £4 that fish. Lovely little weight builders. Get the hook bait out there. But the carp in this lake, they can average sort of over £10 really, so working hard, and even if you only catch sort of 10 or 12 fish in a day, that's going to be £100 a fish. So if you only get 10 bites in the sort of whole 5 hours of a match, it involves a lot of casting and working hard when you're waggler fishing. So it sort of pays off to be active. See, I've cast out there and I've not had a bite. So instead of feeding again, I'm going to reel in and cast. I'm going to try not feeding again, just casting it out there. That way the only splash is my hook bait, and hopefully a few fish go towards it. So again, I've not had a bite there, so this time I'm going to feed and then twitch the float back into the feed. No bites, I'm reeling back in again. So this time I'm going to try feeding before I cast out, just to get the fish competing again. One or two out there. Cast the waggler over the top, but importantly, before it hits the water, I feather the float down. There we go. And it means the pellets sort of hit the water so much more naturally. If you let the float hit with a big splash, then it's not natural for the fish, and you want to sort of try and mimic what you're feeding out there. It's absolutely pouring down with rain. My hands are going numb, but we're catching on a pellet waggler. Just makes no sense whatsoever, but it's what these fish want. Got my thermals on. I'm absolutely freezing. Yeah, we're having a brilliant session. So that clutch is working for me. Reasonably light main line, but shallow lake like this, fish do tend to charge off, and if they want to go, I can just let them go. Like I said, the carp are sort of averaging £10 really, quite often more. I've had fish to £20 in this lake. I think there might even be a 30 or one or two of them. So I've got strong hooks, KKH hooks. They stay really sharp. But importantly, they're nice and strong when you're bent into one of these big fish. So because it's shallow, I'm keeping the rod low until it comes close, within netting range, and then I'm going to lift it at the last minute. Ooh. There we go. And there's a nice chunky Boston mirror. Probably, it's definitely double figures. I'll keep some bait going in and I'll show you the fish. There we go. Try and lift it up if it'll let me. Nice leathery mirror. It might not let me, but see if we can show you Boston beauty. There we go. Whoop. Bit lively, so we'll put it back. We'll see if we can get another one. Like I mentioned before, I've got my big rod set up with the new precision pellet wagglers, and while I'm looking at a fish there, a fish slightly further out, so I'm going to try and catch one on this. can see a few fish over there, a bit beyond my swim. I'll keep the bait going in my swim, and because I've just hooked one there, I'm going to rest that and have a couple of chucks on the bigger float towards where I can see a few fish. So here we go. See if we can catch one away from the feed. There we go, it's nearby it. Made a big splash. Hopefully a few fish will go towards it. I'm going to try reeling back a little bit. No, he's not had it, but it was worth a cast. And then what I can do, keep the bait going in the original swim. Oh, it did have it. Ooh. Keep the bait going in the original swim. And then what I can do with this bigger float is I can actually cast beyond my feed then. So, switch to the bigger float for a little while. I'm just going to cast it beyond the feed. Feather it when it hits the water. See, the splash on that float's totally different. It's just a big splash. Hopefully it's going to draw fish from a nice little area. And I'll keep the bait going in a bit shorter from the float. And what I can do, reel it back into the feed, and then we're fishing just as we were before in amongst the feed. And I keep twitching the float. There's one fish by the float. Does it follow the pellet down? Sometimes you can see like a swirl by the float, and it's the fish sort of following the bait down, and a few seconds later you get a bite, but nothing's happened that time. I'm going to try casting right in the feed this time. I've got that bigger float on. 10 gram precision pellet waggler. Feather it down, nice big splash. Nothing yet. So I'm going to feed again. Twitch the float back. And let that hook bait drop down again, gives me another chance. And you can do that sort of 2 or 3 times some days. Just gives you a few more bites at the cherry. Nothing there. So I think this time I'm going to try cast without feeding. Just try and mix it up a bit. Obviously, like with all shallow fishing, it's about sort of weaning the fish onto the hook and getting them to take your hook bait. It's not always a good thing feeding loads and loads of bait. It's all about trying to get the fish to find your hook bait. So I'm not fed for a little while. I'm going to try another cast again. Just make sure that the only splash out there is my hook bait. And pick up the catapult. Oh, there we go. So I had a few casts then without feeding. It feels like a decent fish. And on the bigger float, it's made that big splash. And those fish have homed in onto that one big splash. It's going to punish me now. Fight a little bit. It's all about taking your time. No point rushing these big fish. On fairly light tackle. Getting absolutely drenched and shivering. But weirdly, these fish are really active. So I'm going to get ready for the next fish. Keep the bait going in. I'm not going mad with it, just sort of 3, 4, 5 pellets at a time. Obviously, if you're not confident with a catapult, just concentrate on the fish getting in, or getting the fish in. It's coming in nice and steady. Get my net ready. Ooh, nice wallowing fish. Like I said, I'm keeping the rod low until it gets close to me. shallow margins on this lake, so I'll wait until it's under my feet. Ooh. Don't always want to get their heads up when they're this big. Not going to pull too hard. Just going to wait. Hopefully I'll get my chance. Fight so hard, these fish. That's why it's fighting hard. It's common. They tend to fight a bit harder. There we go. Nice chunky common carp. Don't know why they always fight harder. Ghosties are the same. We've had 1 or 2 ghosties too. Long fish, that one. I'm not going to risk holding it up, I don't think, that one. Lovely fish though. We're getting back, another double figure fish. So only takes 10 of those and you've got well over £100 really, so it's worth taking your time. 1 or 2 fish there in amongst the feed that we've kept going in. I'm going to stay with a big float. See that float stock moved up, just leave a gap so it's just a few inches, so when you strike the float sort of folds over and you're more direct into the fish. If you're striking against the float, there's sort of less chance of you hooking the fish. I'm out of breath now. Let's see if we can get another 4 or 5 pellets. Do it again. Get them looking for the feed, chasing the pellets around. I'm going to cast right in amongst it this time. Nice big splash. Wait a few seconds, if nothing happens then either feed, twitch the float or recast. Feed, twitch it back in amongst it. Swirl there by the float. Feed again, reel back in, have another cast. Like I said, you've got to keep active. You get rewarded for your hard work, keep casting. There you go, splash down. Fish has gone down on it. Followed it down, but it's not found it. You can see its tail when it hit the water. It followed the bait down, but it didn't quite find it. So notice I had that sort of fish come to the float as soon as I cast out. So there's a fish. Nice bite too. You get rewarded for the more casts you do and more times you twitch your float. It's all about being active. Keep the bait going in. And unbelievably, we're catching loads of fish when it's absolutely freezing cold. See that rod bent right down. Nice through action rod. It's going to absorb all the lunges. It's cutting right to my left at the minute. If it wants to go, just got to let it go. Coming towards me now. Not quite as big as the one we just had, I don't think. Might be wrong. The beauty with this place, 1 minute you can catch a £2 carp or a £2 F1, and next minute you're latched into a £15 ghost carp or a common. There we go, nice little mirror that one. Oh. You never know quite what you're going to catch. Nice mirror. Not quite a monster though, but at least it didn't make my arm hurt so much. Doesn't want to go back. There we go. Put that fish back, so I'm going to keep feeding. So hook bait's really simple. All I've got is a bait band tied on the end of a hair. Nice 14 hook, nice and strong. All I'm doing is banding a pellet. Exactly the same as what I'm feeding out there. So the wind's quite gentle today, so no real need to be using the sort of 12 gram floats, but if I do see a few fish further out and there's sort of not many amongst my feed, then I'll simply just clip on the bigger float and cast out to the fish. But at the minute there's a few fish in amongst the feed. Ooh, hit my float then. Yeah, there's a few fish in amongst the feed at the minute. So by casting really regularly, keeping the bait going in, like I said, you only need to feed sort of 2 or 3 pellets at a time, just to keep the fish looking around. Cast the float over the top. And if I do find that I'm casting regularly but I'm not getting bites, then I can drop down to that other rod with the smaller float on, smaller splash, just a bit more natural. And have another couple casts on this, and if I don't catch another fish, I'll drop onto that other rod, I think. Got a noisy tractor in the distance. Hopefully you can still hear me. Is a busy place, Barton, next to Birmingham Airport. Got railway behind me, roads. Oh, missed the bite then. Another important thing is when you're casting, same applies to wagglers and feeders and everything really, but I've got like a 4 foot drop to my rod, probably 5 foot to the float, and that means you can cast out with more of a lob, and that's quite important when you're fishing a pellet waggler. It's just sort of the cast that you make. I've hooked a fish in my margin then and dropped my catapult in. Shows how solid it is. See if we get my catapult back. There it is. You know what, I think I've done quite a few pellet waggler videos like this, and I always seem to catch one under my rod. I used to fish viaduct a lot, and it was all pellet waggler fishing back in the day, and because you were plopping your float under your rod, you're making all that noise, and eventually you'd hook one and get your rod pulled out your hand, and it's exactly what's happened. Literally just there. It's only sort of 2 or 3 foot deep there, but because we've been casting out and dropping the float in short, a fish has come along and I've had one right under my rod. Can't remember what I was talking about, but nice bonus all the same. It just shows, like I said before, it's important to have your clutch set, because if you weren't expecting that, you'd break the main line. Tend to be big fish when you do that as well. Unexpected bonus, but we'll take it. Scrapping well now. There we go. Get that thing. Oh. Just showed they're not always right out in the middle of the lake. Sometimes they're under your feet. Another chunky fish. Sure, it's not the one we just caught, it's a different fish, but we'll put that one back. Right, where was I? Got my catapult back and keep the bait going in. Keep an eye on my float as well. Yeah, so I had a few casts without catching anything then. I was just about to swap to a smaller rod, smaller float. Move that back down again. And we're ready to go. Still on the big float at the minute. Obviously if I see fish sort of left or right, I can have a cast to it. Not fed for a little while, so yeah, still a few fish out there. Cast right in amongst the feed, feather the float. Nothing that time, but there was one near the float. See a little swirl there. Just gone a bit flat now. I think the smaller float would probably be better, but I'll have another couple casts. They're still competing for the sort of bait, even though they sort of seem to be sort of in this area really. Coming into summer and they will sort of spread out a bit more. Sometimes you can sort of feed your peg for 2-3 hours and nothing can happen, and then sort of the last couple hours few fish find your feed, and then you can have a really big bag up session later on in the day. But feels like a decent fish, this one. Obviously because we're using a bigger float, I sort of like to think that it sort of mimics the sort of 15 or 18 mil boilies hitting the water, and this venue sees a lot of them, so potentially a bigger float could equal a bigger fish really. This one's fighting well. Just going to take my time with it. Kiting to the left again. Making my arm ache. This 12-foot rod's quite sort of a nice sort of powerful rod. It's designed for pellet waggler fishing really. It's not really a traditional rod. It's got a fairly substantial backbone to it. It's getting close. Just going to keep my rod low until it gets close enough to net. The clutch is still set in case it wants to run. It does. So I'm not feeding this time, I'm just going to concentrate on getting this fish in because it feels like a decent fish this time. I say this time, they're all decent fish, but just going to let it run. Probably another common, scrapping a bit hard. Gonna need a rest after this fish, I think. I've not bothered setting a bomb or a feeder up, but these methods do complement each other. Obviously we're feeding a lot of bait, and sometimes you can find that you can have a good spell on the bottom, either a bomb or method feeder over the top. Sometimes a method feeder can sort of draw the fish in to that one spot and amongst all the feed, and other days a bomb can be better because it's obviously it's what they're eating out there, so why not put an 8mm pellet out there and amongst the feed. At the minute we're having an awesome session on the pellet waggler. There we go. Another nice chunky fish, that one. I think I'm going to have a bit of a rest now, and I'll probably come back to you with a couple more fish. Because my arm hurts. Right, so we've had an absolute brilliant session here at Barston today. Just shows how fishing can throw up a few surprises. Set off this morning, it was absolutely freezing. It still is. But these fish certainly don't know about it. Ooh. Been a really rewarding day. I've had to keep active, it's not been that easy, but it's been really good. Still early on in the year to see fish competing for feed, and we've caught loads today. Probably had close to 200 pounds in sort of a few hours, which is crazy really, especially when it's been so cold. I've been absolutely shivering. I've got all my thermal clothing on. Yeah, these fish are feeding up in the water, these 8mm pellets, and we're getting loads of bites. I've had to work at it a bit as a fish. It's not been about casting out and just feeding. I've had to keep doing a few tricks. Keep the bait going in. We've swapped and changed between floats. Sometimes the bigger float's been good, sometimes the lighter float when the wind drops. Given the new precision pellet wagglers a good workout. So they should be out by the time you're watching this video. There's another airplane comes over. It's a noisy place, Barston, but we've had a really good session today. See, sometimes the bigger float's been better, sometimes a lighter float. So the new floats come in 8, 10 and 12 gram. It just gives you the option of casting out a bit further or making a really big splash if you need to draw the fish in. We've had loads of fish like this today. Oh, there we go. Another great big Barston fish. I think whilst I catch myself a few more of these fish, we'll end the video there. Hopefully you've picked up a few tricks, tips on how to catch on a pellet waggler. Hopefully you'll give the floats a go once they're in the shops. See if you can let me hold it up. Maybe not. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for plenty more fishing content, and we'll see you next time.